There's a moment in every empath's journey when they stop trying to prove they're not the problem. They stop replaying conversations to figure out what they said wrong. They stop shrinking themselves to fit into spaces that were never designed to hold them. And the people who benefited from their self-doubt panic. Because the empath has reached the final stage of healing that most people never even know exists, and it changes everything. Carl Jung spent decades observing what happened when empaths finally stopped abandoning themselves for others. What he discovered wasn't just interesting, it was revolutionary. He found that empaths who reach this final stage don't just heal from their wounds. They become fundamentally immune to the dynamics that wounded them in the first place. Today I'm going to show you what this final stage looks like, why it feels so radical, and how reaching it means you'll never lose yourself in someone else's chaos again. Jung noticed something peculiar in his practice. His empathic patients would do tremendous work. They'd identify their patterns, understand their triggers, set boundaries they actually enforced. But there was always one thing that still destabilized them: the need to be seen accurately by people who were committed to misunderstanding them. They'd leave toxic relationships, but still feel compelled to send that final letter explaining their side. They'd go no contact, but obsessively imagine the conversation where the other person finally gets it. They'd build new lives, but carry this nagging feeling that somewhere, someone was telling a wrong story about them, and they needed to correct it. Then one day, something shifted. The patient would come in and mention, almost casually, that they'd heard through the grapevine what someone was saying about them. And instead of the usual spiral of anxiety and the urge to defend themselves, there was just nothing. Not suppressed anger, not spiritual bypassing, genuine, complete disinterest. Jung realized he was witnessing the final stage of empathic healing, the moment when the empath stops participating in their own character assassination. What distinguished this stage from earlier progress was its totality. These empaths weren't using techniques to manage their reactivity. They weren't white-knuckling their way through silence. They had reached a state where other people's narratives about them simply held no power anymore. Jung called this psychological sovereignty. The empath had finally stopped outsourcing their self-concept to people who would weaponize it. To understand why this stage is so crucial, you need to see what Jung saw in partially healed empaths. They had done significant work. They could articulate what happened to them. They understood the dynamics. They'd left the situations. But they were still emotionally invested in being understood by people who had proven, through consistent action, that they would never choose understanding. This investment showed up in specific ways. They'd say they didn't care what their ex thought, but they'd still craft perfect responses in their head. They'd claim they were over their family's dysfunction, but they'd still feel their stomach drop when someone said, "Your mother was asking about you." They'd insist they'd moved on, but they'd still secretly hope that one day, somehow, the truth would come out and everyone would see they weren't the villain. Jung recognized this as a form of psychological imprisonment. The empath's external life had changed, but their internal life was still running on the old operating system. They were still seeking validation from the jury that had already delivered a verdict they had no intention of revising. The final stage happens when the empath stops appealing the verdict, not because they agree with it, but because they've realized the court was rigged from the beginning, and continuing to present evidence is just giving it legitimacy it never deserved. But here's what makes this stage so difficult and so misunderstood. It doesn't happen through more boundary work or better communication skills. It happens through radical acceptance, real bone-deep acceptance that some people will believe whatever they need to believe about you to justify how they treated you, and nothing you say or do will ever change that. Jung found that empaths resist this acceptance because it feels like giving up. They've been taught that good people don't give up on relationships, that loving people keep trying. That empathic people always leave the door open for reconciliation, but the final stage requires closing doors that should have been locked years ago. not with anger or ceremony, just with quiet, definitive finality. Think about the empath who spent years trying to make their sibling understand how their childhood affected them differently, who sent the emails, had the tearful conversations, tried family therapy. The final stage requires accepting that their sibling isn't confused about their experience. They're committed to a version of reality where they're not complicit, and no amount of truth-telling will penetrate that commitment. And that acceptance is devastating, because it means releasing the fantasy that one day they'll be truly seen by someone they desperately wanted to be seen by. Jung observed that this acceptance process cannot be rushed. Some empaths arrive at it after one final disappointment that breaks something open. Some need multiple cycles of hope and disillusionment before they finally let go. But what emerges on the other side is remarkable. An empath who has genuinely stopped needing to be understood by people who are determined to misunderstand them. This manifests in specific observable ways that Jung documented. The healed empath stops defending themselves, not out of defeat, but out of clarity. They've realized that people who need to villainize you to justify their own behavior will twist any defense into further evidence of your guilt. They stop explaining their boundaries, not because they lack conviction, but because they've learned that people who respect boundaries don't need lengthy explanations, and people who don't respect boundaries won't be convinced by them. They stop correcting false narratives, not because the truth doesn't matter, but because they've accepted that some people prefer comfortable lies to uncomfortable truths, and that's not their problem to solve. What makes this stage look like coldness to outside observers is its completeness. The healed empath doesn't have moments of weakness where they break silence to set the record straight. They don't get baited into defending themselves. They don't engage with people sent to extract information or deliver messages. They've built an internal fortress so solid that nothing penetrates. But Jung emphasized that this isn't coldness, it's clarity. The empath has finally stopped confusing their desire to be understood with their responsibility to make people understand them. Here's where Jung's framework becomes essential. Jung believed that psychological health required accepting that you cannot control how others perceive you, that your job isn't to manage everyone's narrative about who you are, that some misunderstandings are actually necessary boundaries in disguise. For empaths, this is revolutionary. They've been socialized to believe that being misunderstood is a failure of communication, that if they just explain better, provide more context, show more vulnerability, eventually people will get it. The final stage shatters this illusion. It's the empath realizing that some people's misunderstanding of you is serving them, and they have no incentive to see you clearly. Jung found that empaths who reach this stage experience a form of freedom they've never known. Suddenly, they're not performing for an invisible audience. They're not crafting their life to disprove someone else's narrative. They're not living in response to false accusations. They're just living for themselves, by their own metrics, in alignment with their own truth. And the people who benefited from their constant self-defense absolutely hate this. Because an empath who stops defending themselves is an empath who's stopped caring about your opinion. And that removes all your leverage. If you're an empath in this final stage, you're probably experiencing something that feels almost surreal. You're hearing things said about you that would have devastated you a year ago, and you're feeling nothing. You're watching people try to provoke you into reaction, and it's like watching a performance you're no longer audience to. You're realizing that the people who truly know you don't need your defense, and the people who've decided who you are don't want it. Jung would tell you that what you're experiencing is exactly right. You haven't become cold or closed off. You've stopped participating in a rigged game. You've stopped giving away your peace for the possibility of being seen by people who've chosen blindness. The final stage completes when you realize that being misunderstood by certain people is actually evidence that you're doing something right, that you've become someone their toxicity can't accommodate, that your growth has made you incompatible with their dysfunction. You don't need them to understand. You don't need them to acknowledge what happened. You don't need them to revise their story, because you've stopped seeking yourself in their eyes. You know who you are, and their version of you is a character in a story you're no longer reading. This is what Jung meant by individuation, becoming whole unto yourself, not needing external validation to know your own truth, being psychologically self-sufficient while remaining capable of genuine connection with people who've earned that access through consistent respect. You're not cold, you're conscious, you're not damaged, you're done. You're not closed off. You're finally, after all this time, free. Welcome to the final stage of healing. Welcome to the part of your journey where you stop defending yourself to people who are committed to misunderstanding you. Welcome to the life where their narrative about you is no longer your emergency. You've let go of the need to be understood by people who were never trying to understand you. And now you're free. Not free from caring, but free from caring what people who never truly saw you think they see. This is psychological sovereignty, and you've finally claimed it.